It is a real pleasure to be back in Leuven to speak at this Diversity in Science event. One of my main interests is in creating a positive research environment, and diversity is a key aspect to this. For me, a positive research environment is one where there is a diverse team that is empowered, recognized, given a clear career developmental trajectory, and can contribute to impactful and reproducible research. So why is diversity important to science? First, there's the overwhelming moral argument. Continuing to sustain a system that was built on exclusion is simply immoral. It is not enough to stop building the edifice of inequality. We really need to actively dismantle it. There's also the values argument. Science is about pushing forward the frontiers of human knowledge. We do not create knowledge to hoard it as a hidden treasure. We wrestle truth from nature to share it with humanity, and a diverse scientific team creates more connections. And then there is the utilitarian argument. A diverse team does better science. Now, from my perspective, this last argument is the least important, but it is the one that I'd like to go into today because it repeatedly comes up as an excuse. Like this quote from Meg Urry shows, you'll often run into people who claim to support the moral and values arguments in favor of diversity, but who quickly move against it on utilitarian grounds, on the basis that excellence needs to come first and that excellence and diversity are in conflict. As Meg says, this argument is insulting, and it is also just plain wrong. Let me first lay out my credibility on this topic. Before moving to Cambridge, I started my lab here in Leuven. I was fresh out of my postdoc, only 28 years old, and I got offered a position to start up my lab here in Leuven in 2009. And I really saw two different sides of the welcoming mat. On the one hand, I had people in senior leadership positions who were offering me a position, and they were really keen to bring me in. They were telling me that they're excited to bring in new ideas. They want to have international talent, internationalize the university, and turn over the leadership that had gotten a bit stale in places. And at the same time, I also had people like the head of the Rieger Institute at that point who took me aside on my first day in Leuven and told me that it was a disgrace that they're giving a position to a foreigner when that position could go to a Flemish scientist. So certainly back then there were very strong opinions in favor of diversity, but also very strong opinions against diversity. Now, in the 10 years that I was here, my team was incredibly successful. We raised 13 million euros, including 2 ERC grants. We published 177 papers, including multiple major research articles. 4 of my alumni are now professors running independent research groups in Belgium, and dozens more have leadership positions in academia, industry, and the clinic around the world. Now, I don't say this to boast about my team, although I am exceptionally proud of them. I say it because this success was based on the diversity of the team that we recruited and that worked here in Leuven. So what did my team look like? Well, I'll start with the stats, but then I want to go through some stories. These are the numbers from my 10 years in Leuven. We had a good gender balance throughout the career pipeline from interns to postdocs. We had a balanced representation of Belgians and international recruits, again, across the pipeline from interns to postdocs. And actually, importantly, those international recruits weren't all just coming from 1 or 2 different countries. They came from 50 different nationalities, from Australia to Zimbabwe. Now, more important than the stats are the stories. Everyone in my team has had to overcome their own unique hurdles, had their own role models, has their own motivation to do science. These are such important stories that we recently wrote a book about each lab member. I could discuss Bolenle and being trained in neuroscience in Nigeria and Germany, bringing a unique perspective to the lab. Or Stevie, who entered biomedical research because of her own experiences with illness, influencing our way of thinking about patient-oriented research. Or James, growing up as a foster kid and working himself the hard way into science. Everyone who works with James would love to clone him, but actually what makes our team tick is the unique skills and perspectives that create a whole greater than the sum. This didn't happen overnight. When I started my lab in Leuven, I was keen to give people a chance who didn't have an in elsewhere. Some professors even sent their rejected applicants to me, joking that I'd take anyone. And yet fast forward 10 years, and the success that our team created changed the dynamic completely. By then, I had people knocking on my door because they wanted the experience of being in an international style lab doing top research. Because of our approach of giving more diverse people a chance in the lab, we were able to fish in a richer ocean and a greater talent pool down the track. So how did we make that happen? How do you create an environment where a diverse team will thrive? And I think here, the key thing is that your research culture needs to come first. If you build a positive research culture, then great science will naturally emerge. If you empower people to make decisions, and that includes making mistakes, then you're no longer the limiting factor, and science can accelerate beyond your personal capacity. If you build an environment of trust and space for creativity and ideas, then new ideas will come from synergies within your team that are greater than the ideas that you could come up with by yourself. I think it's also really important to treat people as people. That sounds simple, but so often people get treated as job descriptions. If you take the time to learn people's story, you understand their motivation, you can then look for ways to align their job to their motivation. And once people are self-motivated, they can really take off in ways that will surprise you. Another approach that we use is to build traditions. We have the German hat tradition in our lab, and we invented our own tradition of the golden pipette. Both of these serve to create a feeling of community and continuity with those who came before in the lab. Finally, I'd like to finish up by raising some common pitfalls that hinder people in proving diversity in the lab, and some advice on how to overcome them. Now, the first advice is for lab members. And here, a pretty common pitfall is that you might not like the culture of the lab, or at least you might think it could improve, but you don't believe that you can influence it because you're just a lab member. For example, maybe you have a PI who makes casual sexist comments or toxic racist remarks. You don't like it, but you cringe inside and have a weak smile and you can't do anything about it. Well, I want you to remember that you actually have the most influence over lab culture because you're there the most. It's not just about the authority in the lab, it's about being there, creating trust with other people, showing the people in the lab what is acceptable behavior and what isn't. And you're there to model that acceptable behavior and to encourage positive behavior. Now, the second piece of advice is for lab leaders. And here, a pretty common pitfall is to want to have a diverse lab, but you don't get diverse applicants. And it's pretty common to have a self-perpetuating demographic in the lab. If you end up hiring all men at the start, it's pretty common that women that come into your lab don't like the look of it and won't stay. Or maybe you have a deep connection to one particular country, like Italy, and you're great at hiring applicants from Italy, but you're not able to create a more diverse set of international applicants. Now here, I think it's really important to remember that you need to start the ball rolling with pioneer hires. You need to actively go out and search for hires from a more diverse demographic, convince them to come and join your lab, and then provide them with the support that they need to become successful. And once they are successful, they're going to then act as the magnets to pull in talent from a much broader talent pool than you would otherwise be drawing from. And finally, a little piece of advice for policy leaders. Here it's pretty common to have people who are clear and articulate with their values and they support diversity, but their policies sometimes send the opposite message. An example here, I think, is the KU Leuven language policy for tenure. To me, this is an anti-diversity policy. It's harmful to new faculty and it sends a chilling effect on future recruitment. And for people in a policy leadership position, I would ask them to remember that if their actions don't match their words, people stop listening to their words. Policies like the language policy for tenure can be changed and should be changed if you actually want to increase diversity here in Leuven. With that, I'd like to finish up. I really want to thank the amazing people that I've worked with over the years here in Leuven at KU Leuven and VIB, and also in Cambridge at Abraham Institute and the University of Cambridge. And then finally, if you're interested in anything that I've been saying today, we've got a lot of career resources that we have developed over the years. You can just click on that link from the QR code and you can go to all the different career development resources that we've put together. Thank you.